One thing that all beginner guitar players should really learn is how to read chord grids as well as tablature. And reading music is also a great skill and an important one to learn down the road. But just to get started, chord grids and tablature are really essential. And so I want to start by talking about chord grids. At the beginning of the tab in this video, you'll see there are 3 chord grids. And there's a C chord, a G chord, and another C chord voicing. And the first thing you want to understand is that the strings of the guitar are written vertically, and the frets are written horizontally. And the thick line at the top indicates the string nut, that piece right there. And so it's sort of as if you're looking at the top of the fretboard, as if you stood the guitar straight up and looked directly at the guitar fretboard at the top. And then the dots really represent your fingers. The dots on the strings represent your fingers. The numbers below each string represent which fingers, the first, second, third, or fourth. And then there are, for any string that doesn't have a dot on it, a finger placed on it, you'll notice there's an X or a 0 at the very top of that string. The X means you don't play that string. You want to get rid of it or not play it. And the 0 means you're going to play it open. So with this C chord in the beginning, the third finger is on the 3rd fret of the 5th string. And the second finger is on the 2nd fret of the 4th string, the open 3rd string, the first finger is on the 1st fret of the 2nd string, and then I have the open 1st string. So that's just a basic C major chord, and I'm muting the 6th string with the 3rd finger there, so that's why there's an X over the 6th string. The next chord grid is actually a bar chord. This is a G chord. In this case, you're going to see a curved line at the top of where my first finger is placed over the 3rd fret. And then you can see I have the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th strings on the 3rd, 5th, and 4th strings respectively. So that would be a G bar chord in chord grid form. And then the last one is actually a higher voicing of a C chord that I've written up here at the 8th fret in the 8th position. Notice how the 5th and 6th string, the E and the A string are muted. You don't play those. So the 3rd, 2nd, and the 1st finger barring across the 8th fret of the top 2 strings. So definitely you want to get real familiar with chord grids. And a little practice and you'll have that. It's really pretty simple after a while. And now on to tablature. So with tablature you're looking at 6 lines. Traditional music notation is 5 lines where you have notes written in the lines and spaces of the staff. Tablature has very little to do with that, so I want you to kind of forget that for the moment. Tablature really represents the 6 guitar strings themselves, with the low E string, the heavy, thick low E string on the bottom, and the high E string on the top. So the numbers on the strings actually just mean the fret that you're playing. So the first thing we're going to play here is a C major scale on the part where it says frets and strings. I have the 3rd fret on the 5th string, then the open, 2nd, and 3rd fret on the 4th string. Open, 2nd, 3rd, and the open and 2nd fret on the 3rd string. Then the open and 1st fret on the 2nd string. If you've taken a basic guitar lessons, you probably recognize that as a simple C major scale. It's just a simple scale. It's just for purposes of explaining the tablature. Now, if we were to add hammer-ons on tablature, in our case, we've got H's underneath the staff indicating which notes are hammered. So the H's indicate the hammer-on. There's also a little curved line between the 2 notes. So hammer-on is where you're going to just pick the first note and hammer your left-hand finger into the 2nd note without picking. So in each case, they're only picked each string 1 time. So that's with hammer-ons. And then pull-offs would be the opposite. If I were to go backwards down the scale and just use pull-offs, you'd see the same curved line with the P underneath it for pull-off. And the next one's with slides. So if you see an S underneath, that indicates a slide. And the straight line between the two numbers indicates the slide as well. So I'm going to play the 3rd to the 5th fret on the 5th string, and then slide from 2 to 3, which is indicated on the tab, on the 4th string, then slide from 5 to 7 on the 4th string, and then from 4 to 5 on the 3rd string. So that's slides on tablature. And now we're on to bends. So there's different types of bends. You can do half-step bends, quarter-step bends, whole-step bends. I'm going to demonstrate some whole-step and half-step bends on tablature. The first one's real simple. I'm playing the 7th fret of the 3rd string. The note's D. And you can see the arrow on the tablature is saying full. I'm going to bend it up a full step, a whole step. That means I'm going to bend it up the equivalent of 2 frets in terms of actual pitch. So if I play this D, I'm going to target this E, that's the 9th fret, 2 frets higher. So that's a whole step bend. And then a release bend, a whole step release bend would be where I do the bend before I actually pick it. So you only hear it release to the 7th fret, to the D. So from D to E is a whole step bend, and then a release bend is the opposite direction. A half step bend, you'll see a half rather than a full on the arrow. And so if, for example, I was going to bend the 9th fret, the E, to the 10th fret, which would be an F, up a half step, and then a half step release bend. Same thing there. So we have the whole step bend, whole step release bend, half step bend, and the half step release bend. And now on page 2 of the tab, you'll see there's a hammer-on and pull-off exercise with tapping, 2-hand tapping. So for example, if I were to take the 5th fret, 8th fret, and 13th fret on the 2nd string, and just tap that. It's a pretty common technique. But on the tablature, that's what it would look like, in this case in 16th notes. 5, 8, 13, 5, 8, 13. So 2-hand tapping with a T underneath it for tapping. That's the thing to look out for with the right hand. And then a tap and actually a bend and a tap. So if I were to bend that D we had earlier, up a whole step, and then tap the 15th fret on the 3rd string, that would be a bend and a tap combined. The next one's grace notes. So that's sort of like a quick note right before the actual note. If I were to just play this note C on the 13th fret of the 2nd string in quarter notes, it sounds obviously just like quarter notes, but if I went like that, there's a quick little hammer-on from the 12th fret. It's not enough to really make that a rhythmic value. The 12th fret doesn't really get any kind of rhythmic value. It just is a quick little grace note. Or you could do a quick little slide like that, same idea. So grace notes are real subtle details into notes, notes that sort of don't really take up any value, but they're just sort of more about the articulation, the phrasing. And then vibrato, you see a squiggly line above the note. If there's any extreme vibrato points, you'll see that in the tab. And then tremolo picking is where you're just playing a note and sort of just picking with your right hand. So you can just start with the 13th fret and tremolo pick like that. And then when you see chords written out in tab, you're going to see the notes written vertically so that they're actually one on top of the other. I've got 4 different C chord voicings going up the top 4 strings here. 2 open, 1 open. And then 5, 5, 5, 3, which is G, C, E, G. And then 10, 9, 8, 8, which is C, E, G, C. And then 14, 12, 13, 12. So you get... So those C chord voicings. And of course, this is just for purposes of explanation. You can see any chord written the same way where you have the notes vertically, stacked vertically. And then a tied note, you'll see that all the time, where a note sustains more than a whole note or more than a certain rhythmic value, where there's a tied note between 2. In this case, on the tablature, you see a note that's going to ring for 8 beats. It's playing the 13th fret and not re-picking that second 13. That's the key. You only pick it once. Okay, and then you have harmonics, which are written in parentheses, and it'll say harmonics above it. So if you had just basic harmonics like that, they'll be written as you see them there on the tab. And then artificial harmonics, where you get the side of your thumb. You'll see those written with an AH above there, artificial harmonics. And then you have volume swells as well. So if I were to do a volume swell where I'm wrapping my finger around the volume knob, bring that up as I pick the note, that's sort of a combined release bend and volume swell, and then a volume swell down at the 8th fret, or you can swell in and out, obviously. And then palm muting. Next one up is palm muting, where you're just taking the side of your right hand and it kind of getting the right amount of mute there so that you still hear the pitch, but you don't hear it sort of wide open. that's palm muting, and then a rake, where you're just sort of rolling the pick as similar to a grace note, where the pick just kind of hits some dead strings on the way to the, in this case, a bend on the second string, like that. So I'm just keeping the side of my picking hand down there as well, just to kind of give those strings a muted sound, and then I get the bend on the second string, which I'm not muting. So you'll see the rake written out with rake above it like that. And that's the basics of reading tablature and chord grids.
My name is John Foreman, and this is a song called Meant to Live.
We're meant to live for so much more. Have we lost ourselves? Somewhere we live inside. Somewhere we live inside.
This time it starts right there on the E. And then the second time